If you're trying to talk to everybody, you're really talking to nobody. If only 2/3 of your episodes is valuable to somebody, if only a third of them, or 25% of your podcast episodes are truly for all of the people listening, then you lose listeners.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, I recently got home from sponsoring an event that was put on for 4 days just for podcasters, and I met a couple of people. I met one guy who had a sports podcast, and I met another guy who had a sports podcast. One of them thought that they were niching, and the other was actually niching. Let's dive in. The gentleman who just simply thought that he was niching, he had a sports podcast, and he's like, well, that's niching. It's about sports. And I talked to him, and I was like, okay, which sports, which teams are you covering? And he said, well, I'm covering basketball, I'm covering football, and I'm covering baseball. And I go, why those three sports? And he said it's because he played basketball, football, and baseball, and he follows all three of them religiously and really understands the dynamic between the players. And then I asked him, so can you explain what you mean by that you're niching? And he said, well, here's the thing. I've got a totally different way of doing it than anybody else in my industry. Anyone else who has sports, they might talk about the head player, the Michael Jordan, the Kobe Bryant, you name it, the person who is the most well-known on the team. And they will talk about how that person is, how that person was feeling during the game, what injuries that person has, and what it means for the team. And he's a little bit different. He's niching, he says, because he has a different approach. He comes with the approach of that I look at the game holistically. I look at all the players. I know everything about all the players. I know where they came from. I know what they're good at and what they're bad at. And when I talk about the teams in football and baseball and basketball, when I talk about those teams, I do it a lot differently because I look at it as a holistic thing instead of just player by player. I look at it, how does the team collectively work? How does this person pass the ball to that person? And how does that person shoot the ball, etc. Depending, of course, nobody shoots the ball in football. I get it. Or baseball. But you know what I mean? He's got all three of these and he feels like it's niched. Why? Because A, he's only got three of the sports. And B, he feels like it's niched because he's different. He does it differently. But here's the biggest reason why it's not niched. It's because he hasn't been doing a good enough job. No offense to him. I'm not trying to make him mad or upset if he listens to this episode. That's not the goal. I just want to say that he doesn't do a good enough job at explaining that he's drawing his line in the sand. You might have heard me talk a little bit about that cave person named You got to bang your chest when you say because that's how I guess cave people did it. And so figures out fire, and then he wants to do the fire, and then he draws his line in the sand because the chief says, hell no, we're not doing fire. That could hurt us. It could burn us. We're not doing that. And so says, I'm not good with the status quo. I'm not good with what the current chief wants to do. And so he draws a line in the sand and he says, on that side of the line, these are the things that happens. Who wants to follow me? So he specifically points out that he is different. He purposefully points out that he is different. But the guy that I met at this podcast event, he doesn't do a good enough job even drawing a line in the sand. So he might do it differently, but he doesn't even say that he does it differently. Second, the next point is he's got three whole sports that he's doing. He's got three different sports. And I'm sorry, very few people follow all three of those sports. So it's not niched at all. It's not niched at all. So the person who cares about, maybe let's just pretend that they really like football and basketball. They couldn't give a darn about baseball. And so 33% of the episodes that this guy is putting out, the person who loves football and loves basketball says, you know what, this podcast isn't actually for me. So what is the mistake that he's making? Think about it for a second. And I want this to sit in your head for a long, long time. If you're trying to talk to everybody, you're really talking to nobody. if only 2/3 of your episodes is valuable to somebody, or 1/3 of your episodes is valuable to the person that you want to support and help, if only 1/3 of them, or only 2/3 of your episodes, or 25% of your podcast episodes are truly for all of the people listening, then you lose listeners. And so I look at the statistics of this guy's social media, and I look at the statistics of his podcast. For the podcast, he is well below the 50 percentile, which means almost nobody's listening to him. He has way, way, way less than 100 downloads per episode. And on his Instagram, he only has like one person that might like or comment. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled, and one of his things had 20. One of them had 20, a couple had 10, but many of them had 1, 2, or 3 people liking or commenting. So this is because he's making a huge, horrible mistake by not understanding what it really means to niche. Yeah, I've got a podcast and it's only for sports fans. And it's only for, I guess, people that like all 3 of these. And it's only if they want it to be different from other sports casts that share all 3 of these, but share it in a different way. But I'm not even going to tell them that it's different. So now let's go and look at the other guy. The other guy is a Buffalo Bills podcast. It's football, but it's only one freaking team, one team. So instead of doing 3 different sports and all of the teams and all of the players and getting nobody listening to you, the other guy does one sport and only one team underneath that sport. And I looked, and they actually have millions of downloads through their YouTube channel, through their podcast, and through the other mediums that they are on. Millions, millions, millions. Very interesting to think of. One guy wants it to be broad and open, and he wants to serve everyone. The other guy only wants to serve just the teeniest, tiniest amount of people. But why does the second guy get such massively better results when he's not even talking about all of football? He's only talking about one team. One team. It's because if you're talking to everybody, if you're trying to talk to all of the people, none of them really are listening. You're not getting heard. So when you go and think about your own podcast, where is it now? If you've got one, what are you doing to niche? Are you trying to talk to everybody, or are you trying to talk to one very finite individual, one avatar? I want you to leave this podcast episode today thinking about if you're niching enough, and thinking about, do I have a friend? Think to this. Think right now. Do I have a friend who's got a podcast, but they're not actually niched and they barely have anyone following them? They're trying to talk to everybody, and that's why they're really talking to nobody. Share this episode with them. If it's you, awesome. Fix it. If it's your friend, awesome. Push copy, paste, and send to your friend so that they can learn what niching truly is, what niching really means, and so that they can understand that the smaller you go, the more listeners you have. I'm sure the one guy who talks about 3 different sports and all of the teams within that sport, I'm sure he talks a little bit about the Buffalo Bills. I'm sure he does. But when we talk about that other guy who only talks about the Buffalo Bills, you would think he's not helping the people that are liking baseball. He's not helping those people that like basketball. He's not helping all those other sports. No one's going to listen. But he actually has millions of downloads. Compared to one download or millions of downloads, which one do you choose? I'll see you on the next episode. You're not alone if you're ready to either get your very first affordable microphone, or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to some legit podcasting studio equipment. Because on all of the forums over the last few months, I'm seeing this all the time. Even my own personal clients that work with my team, they're ready to get that next microphone. They're asking us for it. Additionally, when I'm on discovery calls with potential clients, they're always asking for this stuff. Hey, what mic do you recommend? Hey, what lighting do you recommend? What webcam should I be using? So many questions. And so what we did, my whole team has put together a PDF so that if you're one of those people who is looking to either get your very first affordable microphone, or if you're ready to upgrade your equipment to more professional podcast studio equipment, whether it's soundproofing or whatever, we've got you covered by going to growyourshow.com/PDF. and you can download the PDF for free. Or right there on the webpage is everything that you would have, and you don't need to download the PDF. Either way, just go to growyourshow.com/PDF, which will put you to the podcasting equipment that me and my team have personally vetted. I'll see you on the next episode.